Nyika yeZimbabwe inotongwa nomsangano noZANU-PF.
Hakuna chinhu chichiri kufamba munyika muno. Makambozviona kupi kuti munhu mutsaru anogona kupa chitsva?
Ndimi makaramba kuteerera mashoko zvinodiwa namusiki chonaika zvatanika. Ndimi makaramba kuteerera mashoko zvinodiwa namusiki chonaika zvatanika.
They've always said that the political landscape in Zimbabwe is slightly or heavily skewed towards male political participants. The women's voice has been muzzled, and less women are heard or taken seriously in the political space in Zimbabwe. And also, there have been two major political parties in Zimbabwe, ZANU-PF and the MDC. Now, the CCC has also entered into the array and has shown itself to be dominant. But in all this jungle, the United Alliance of Zimbabwe, UZA, has come in to change the political narrative. It is led by a female president, and she is looking at breaking barriers in the political, social, and economic space of Zimbabwe. A scientist by training and profession, she has come to challenge the male dominance in politics of Zimbabwe. Now, this is the Free Talk, Free Nation, in proud partnership with the Frederick Newman Foundation. And we discuss the politics, the economy, and the people issues here on the Free Talk. So welcome back to this edition of the Free Talk with me, your host, as usual, Dara Blessed Mhlanga. And we give you the nuggets, the real issues around the political, socio-economic issues in Zimbabwe. Now, this evening I am joined by Elizabeth, the president of UZA, and we're going to be discussing politics, Zimbabwe, and its future. Now, welcome and thank you very much for joining me, Elizabeth.
Thank you so much for having me.
Beautiful. Now, I understand that you are eyeing the presidency in 2023. Now, just talk to us about that.
Sometimes your path is chosen for you. I will be the president in 2023. I'm quite confident of that. It really is time, I think, in Zimbabwe. People are ready for a woman. If you really speak to the ordinary person on the ground, what we've had so far in government's not been working. And so I think at this point in time, it's time for something very different, radically different, and certainly time for a woman.
But why do you say, why do we have to talk about women, men, instead of just a president, sure, regardless of gender?
Yeah. No, look, in Zimbabwe, there are major issues that we are all contending with. Life has not been what people expected it to be at this point in time within Zimbabwe, in a country that's very well endowed with everything you could ask for in terms of natural resources. We've got the human capital, we've got the infrastructure, we've got almost everything we need in the country. So look, it's not just about gender, it's not just about a woman as president. It's time for a new president. It's time Zimbabwe sees very different leadership. And so I happen to be someone who is, a candidate for the 2023 presidential elections, and I am a woman.
How did you find yourself in the seat of presidency?
Sure. It sort of came about by happenstance. In 2020, I was faced with a challenge within the region where I live. I live in I live at the edge of Hwange National Park, right next to the largest national park in Zimbabwe, a wilderness space. And at the time, there were foreign entities that were wanting to enter that space with the interest of coal mining. So I'm a conservationist. I've lived amongst wildlife for the last 8 years. It's really the life that I've had, and I'm very concerned about protecting wilderness spaces. So in 2020, this was something that I was grappling with when they were speaking of mining in Hwange National Park. It just seemed to me so irresponsible and so foreign. A space that's been protected all these years, a space that's for the benefit of Zimbabweans and tourists who come from all over the world. It just didn't add up and didn't make sense. So in 2021, after really building a lot of pressure to reverse the decision to mine in Hwange National Park, I became very concerned because people were phoning me from all over Zimbabwe saying, there are people coming to mine in our area, and it's also a special space. Some of these spaces had cultural significance. Some of these spaces were also national, parks or national spaces that needed to be protected for the purpose of wildlife. And so I started spending a lot of time on this issue, and I thought, well, let me not work on this in isolation. Let's sit around a table with people who also are concerned about these issues. And so I invited about 30 people to come together, and this was on 29 May 2021. And we sat around a table and talked about what I was concerned about, and that was protecting the elephants and keeping the wildlife spaces, from invasion, as it were, or exploitation. But it seemed, as we were sitting around that table, there were people from every province in Zimbabwe, and everyone had different concerns. We were all sitting there with different issues that we were worried about. Some people were saying we've got young people who right now are not getting jobs because there are no jobs. A lot of our industrial ventures have sort of fallen apart in Zimbabwe, and the economy has been not one that is conducive towards business investments. So a lot of people don't have jobs, and a lot of our young graduates coming from secondary school or colleges even, or universities, they're not finding employment. So people were saying, look, we need to do something about creating jobs. Others were saying, look, have you been on the roads? There are potholes everywhere. Local government is not looking after the local areas. Others were saying we're not even getting clean water to our houses. I mean, if you can't get water, a basic human necessity, to your house, where do you begin? So what emerged from this conversation was we need to really address these issues at a governmental level. And we sat and thought about, okay, so how do we do that? Do we pressure government? And everyone sitting around the table had come from different political backgrounds. I think I was the only person who had never been in politics. And everyone said, we need a new government. We need new leaders. And I was, at that meeting, elected the president of the United Zimbabwe Alliance. So we formed a political party, conceived of it that day on the 29th of May. And ever since, we've been working on really shaping a new government for Zimbabwe. And I happen to be the president of this organization.
But you've spoken about all these problems that you see blighting Zimbabwe. But the current leadership, led by President Emmerson Mnangagwa, he said that they are dealing with these things. They are dealing with the roads, they're dealing with the water, they're dealing with employment. In fact, their 2018 manifesto promised the creation of 2.2 million jobs. And you're saying that nothing's happening?
Look, I'm not saying nothing is happening in Zimbabwe. There are a lot of people who are doing a lot of things. We're just not seeing the progress we would expect. I still see reversal of a lot of the development and the progress that we should be seeing today in Zimbabwe. So as UZA, as the United Zimbabwe Alliance, one of our ideologies or one of our founding values is that we're not going to sit and criticize anyone. We believe that people maybe are doing the best they can, but they perhaps are not the capable and competent people that we need to lead Zimbabwe. So we are going to look for the best and brightest leaders and find leadership that can create a change. We believe that today there's still, no matter how many jobs have been promised, there are not enough jobs in Zimbabwe. I am a business person. When you go to establish a business in Zimbabwe, there's so many obstacles. It's so encumbering that you really cannot progress in this nation. We believe government really needs to be more about what the people need as a country. We need to consult the citizens. We need to make sure the citizens are the center and the focus of what we do in this country. And we don't believe that's happening. At the end of the day, there are so many challenges in everything you want to do. I mean, you look at young people today wanting to register to vote. To get an ID is such a challenge. To get a passport, these are things we should all be entitled to. So perhaps it's inefficiencies. The intent might be there, it might be right, but there are inefficiencies in the current government. And you speak of Emerson Mnangagwa, but the government is currently comprised of more than one political party, right? We don't just have one political party represented in this current government. And therefore, as we're looking at the prospects of leadership right now, we don't believe that they're capable. I spent half a day not too long ago in Kwazana East, where we had a candidate that was contesting in the by-elections. And in just half a day, the challenges I saw on the ground, the waste management system is non-existent. There are mounds and mounds of waste. People are living amongst health challenges. And the sewer system apparently is blocked and not functioning properly within an entire constituency.
And who do you blame for that?
Well, at the end of the day, it starts at the top. I mean, you've got to look at the leadership within government, but then of course it trickles down to the local government level. We have to work on a complete rehaul of Zimbabwe's leadership structures. We need to make sure that there's a complete change in the complexion of what we are doing as a government, and that starts with looking from the top and saying, okay, whoever's leading this current government, all the way down to the individuals who are in the local government. Now, it may be a matter of retraining. We might have to look at ways that we retrain and change the mindset of our leadership within Zimbabwe. Because ultimately, that also is one of the biggest challenges. We live in an economy where a lot of exploitation and extraction is happening, rather than preservation and the uplifting of our nation, and realizing that we have almost everything we need in our country. So I think in Zimbabwe we tend to look afar for solutions, and we think we cannot do it ourselves. And perhaps that's the mindset of the current leadership. We can't do it ourselves, but I believe differently. I believe opportunities in Zimbabwe are limitless. I can say that I've experienced it firsthand, operating in the tourism industry. We have everything we need. What we need is to remove the barriers and make it easier for people to experience Zimbabwe.
But you say that you, as UZA, you're not going to criticize. How do we know that what's there is wrong if you don't criticize it?
It's not that we don't, we are going to make people aware, and it's not us that even have to make people aware of what's happening, because you speak to the ordinary person. I've been to every constituency throughout Zimbabwe. I've traveled for the last 9 months, meeting people in the rural areas, speaking with individuals face to face, and really listening to what they're saying. We don't need to criticize anything. The citizens know what's happening. They're living it. When you have an environment where, individuals cannot progress, they cannot. I'll give you a real example. Not too long ago, I was in Manicaland speaking with women, and they were telling me they didn't even have a clinic that they could go to birth their children. So they had to go to villages several kilometers away from home, carrying, almost at 9 months term, and have to go and stay for a few days waiting, hoping, that everything will go well for them. It's unacceptable. If you can't have basic healthcare services, you don't need to criticize. It's an issue that's happening for real, like everywhere you go. Some of the roads that I drove in Binga, when I went to Binga recently, they're collapsing. It's a risk. to be
But if you
driving on
don't
these
speak,
roads.
if you don't speak, and someone says these problems are caused by sanctions on Zimbabwe, real good leadership, but sanctions. Do you agree with that?
I don't agree with that. I believe in Zimbabwe, look, sanctions have their place. And in countries where you have rogue leadership, certainly it can be an effective tool. In Zimbabwe, there are no sanctions against Zimbabwe as a nation. There are still people operating, selling products abroad. We are fully engaging with the international business community. Like, we are actually a fully fledged economy that is working with other countries. Where the sanctions come into play in Zimbabwe, they were placed against individuals. And so you have to look at what were the underlying causes for that. What were the reasons that these sanctions were put in place? But I don't believe this fallacy that everyone perpetuates that says there are sanctions in Zimbabwe. I operate a tourism safari operation. I have tourists coming from the Western world all the time into Zimbabwe. They're not obstructed by sanctions. So let's get our facts straight on that. You know, I really think that sometimes it's maybe an excuse for what is not being done. I also happen to think that a government needs to be accountable to the people. I believe the citizens have the right to request and demand that the government do its job. I've been in some of the most humble of communities. I was in St. Mary's, and I walked into a community hall where we were hosting an event, a Meet the President event. 100 people in the audience. During the peak of the COVID times, we were limited. And you look at the building itself, which is being managed and operated by local government, and the ceiling is collapsing. You walk outside, the septic system is exposed. There's a pungent smell in the air. Come on, don't tell me that it's sanctions that's causing you to fail to look after your community halls, spaces where people are supposed to gather. Look at all of the recreational facilities throughout Zimbabwe. Think about it. Our young people should be going to swimming pools. They should be going to soccer fields that are well maintained. These facilities already existed when we gained independence. It's a matter of maintaining them. And we're failing to do that.
Let me take you to the just ended by-elections. Your candidates performed poorly there, but you seem to think that you're going to be president in 2023.
I think you need to, look at the lens, right? So when you say performed poorly, we're a new political party, unlike some of these very established political parties. You think of MDC and others who have been around for many years.
MDC, you actually beat MDC in this.
In many aspects, yes. So the way we viewed this by-election, and it came upon us very unexpectedly, right? This was an opportunity for us to really understand the process of elections. I remember that I'm first time in politics. I'm not a 20, 30-year career politician.
You're the Donald Trump of Zimbabwe.
I'm the Donald Trump of Zimbabwe, indeed. Many differences there, but certainly. So for me, it was this opportunity for us to look at what do we need to do to prepare for 2023. So we view it as a success. We don't view it as a failure. We are looking in 2023 at fielding candidates in every constituency across Zimbabwe. We will have councillors throughout Zimbabwe. We want to make sure that we are represented fully so that we are essentially building a new government for Zimbabwe. So in order to do that, you can't go completely blind into an election. We actually, as UZA, spent the first 9 months primarily in rural areas. We didn't work in urban areas, but we contested in urban areas. So we were in very remote rural spaces, and then at the last minute, we fielded 4 candidates when we were given the, sort of the time frames. And these 4 candidates were all in urban areas. So we were in Midlands, and then we also were in Harare. And these were not spaces we'd worked extensively to mobilize members. We are very confident about 2023 because we have a growing membership beyond, I think, any other political party. We're growing very fast. And partly it's because I think Zimbabweans are ready for change. If you look at the by-elections, people didn't show up to vote. You really had a marginal number of individuals that actually turned up to vote. So I believe there are a lot of voters that are sitting at home. A lot of them we're meeting have not even registered to vote. So we're trying to persuade them that their vote has value. A lot of people don't see value anymore in the political,
But
process.
how do you change from having 2 votes at a polling station to winning in general election? I mean, I want to understand that.
I can understand the viewpoint that, look, we've got a long way to go, and we know that we do. But we also are confident that the youth have really not turned up to vote. The youth are not yet engaged. So we're working on very different strategies. I happen to be a president who believes that I don't want to wait until I'm sitting in office as president to work on our country. And so there are programs and projects we're putting in place where we will be engaging citizens, essentially the voters that we want to reach. I'm right now focusing on a goal of building 30 companies across Zimbabwe, 30 fully fledged enterprises. We are looking for high potential individuals who have bright ideas, who are enterprising, and we want to support them and help them make this reality, create jobs before we even get into government. We are talking of, at the community level, working with community members, looking at the ideas they have. I mean, I've come across citizens who have products and potentials that they don't even fully understand. In one of the areas we visited, they had sesame seeds growing in abundance and they didn't know what to do with them. So, couldn't you commercialize a project like that and turn it into something viable and sustainable? So these are alternative ways that we will use, rather than the conventional way, to engage the citizens, to help them understand that they are relevant, that their vote is important.
Joyce Mujuru, having ran as a presidential candidate in 2018, she sort of hung her political boots. And in doing so, she said that Zimbabwe appeared, or she accepted that Zimbabwe was a 2-party state. Do you think you can turn around that and break the jinx?
I believe so. I think it's time. I think that, yes, it's been a 2-party state, but I think it's time for there to be a third very viable political party. Zimbabwe is very polarized on one extreme or the other, and I think that there's a lot of middle ground, a lot of citizens who just haven't yet found a political party they believe in enough to become actively engaged and actively involved. I'm receiving messages, so many messages, from around the world. We've got citizens in the diaspora, we've got people here, citizens in Zimbabwe, and I'm receiving messages overwhelmingly from young people who are saying, I'm going to vote for the first time. I've never wanted to vote. There's never been a reason to vote, but now they want to vote. So I believe, we've got a long way to go as UZA to reach the citizens. We're saying by 2023, we need to reach 6.5 million citizens. That's an ambitious goal. But all the 9 months that we've been in existence, we've never really activated our social media presence. It's only up recently when we started the by-elections. If you look at the footprint, we've been focusing on meeting face-to-face, speaking with citizens, learning from them. And that's what's shaped our agenda. That's what's shaped what we focus on as priorities for the future government. And so now it's time, I think, yes, let's make sure that everyone knows we exist. Let's make sure we broaden our reach. And we will see those votes. We will see the third force, which is UZA, become a viable force, I think, in terms of the 2023 elections.
Speaking to Welshman Ngule of the CCC, he says to me that the biggest reason why we have failed to have a change in government is because the opposition is too fragmented. And at the end of the day, as a result, you failed to have that force that changes. So do you think that as UZA, you can outdo everyone else, over 100 political parties, to fight the gigantic ZANU-PF?
We are going to fight the gigantic ZANU-PF, and I do believe that Welshman Ngube is right. I think that with Zimbabwe, when you look at the opposition parties, it's always been this, the approach that they've taken has always been, let's bring all the political parties together, let's form alliances, and that is what the premise of the alliance has been for opposition politics. With UZA, you'll notice our name is United Zimbabwe Alliance. And some people will say, does that mean you want an alliance with other political parties? We say no. We don't believe that you can bring different political parties together to form an alliance, because we all have different ideologies, we've got different views, we've got founding values that are all very different. Our mission, our vision is different. So it doesn't work. What we are saying is we are forming an alliance with the citizens of Zimbabwe. We are saying, citizens, come together. And our slogan, is actually, I don't know if you know this, but we started off at the table saying, these are the two parties that have been around forever, right? This is what Zimbabwe has known for the past 42 years, cumulatively. We are bringing Zimbabwe together. And we're saying, hold that tightly, because we want to make sure the Zimbabwean citizens, doesn't matter their background, doesn't matter where they come from, doesn't matter their past political affiliations, as long as they embrace what UZA represents, our ideology, which is citizens' engagement, which means we want the citizens to be at the center of what we are doing. As long as they support and embrace that, they become part of our alliance. Not political alliances, because you will have fragmentation. You will have what you see right now in the political arena is a lot of disputes and a lot of, sort of reconfigurations, constant reconfigurations. Well, we as UZA want to make sure we are going, with a fresh, clean, I like to say unblemished, path to 2023 elections, because ultimately that's what it's going to take. We cannot afford, as Zimbabweans, to be confused about what we stand for come 2023.
I have sat with many politicians and across, and they've looked at me in the eye, and they've told me that they're bringing fresh politics. They've told me that they are going to win. One of them is Douglas Togarase Mwonzora of the MDC Alliance. And he pledged, sitting just across me, that he was going to have 66% win in 2023 general election. And the by-elections just humbled him and his party. And a whole other politicians have been humbled. Now, the confidence that you exude right here, will it still stand in 2023, in your view?
Undoubtedly. Look, we are just beginning, and we've already seen that we've got the stamp of approval from the citizens, and that's what matters to me. It doesn't matter, how large the task or any of that kind of thing.
How have you gauged that stamp of approval?
I have personally traveled to every constituency that I could. I have been in the rural areas. I have met with Wanambuya, we call, our grandmothers. I have met with the young people, the youth. I have worked with community for so many years as well. And I've had those real conversations with them about what is it that we need to do as Zimbabwe. Everyone's answer is the same. We need change. We understand that. But what kind of change? When you actually speak to the citizens, no matter how you dress up as a new political party, no matter how much you entertain people, people want to know that they're going to have leaders that are actually going to take the steps necessary to build this country. And as UZA, we are the first political party to have had that mantra that says, let's unite as we build Zimbabwe. It's now that everyone is coming on board and saying different variations of our slogan. Everyone is saying Zimbabwe will be built now, but we are changing the whole narrative around politics in Zimbabwe. So I believe that as I've been speaking with citizens, they are giving us the affirmation. And I'm telling you, it's going to sound very gender, imbalanced, but the women in Zimbabwe are all so confident and so certain that, if we as UZA can reach enough people, I think ultimately our challenge is to be able to have the footprint across the whole country. If we can reach enough people, women will show up. The women in Zimbabwe have carried the greatest burden. Yes, our husbands, the fathers of the homes, they go out and oftentimes they're the breadwinners, but the women are the ones that have to stay back and look after the children and worry about, the direction we are going as a family. And when I say a family, I say a Zimbabwean family. I mean a Zimbabwean family. So the women have the loudest voice wherever I've gone, and they are saying we must make sure that Zimbabwe changes government in 2023. So I'm confident because they've given me that assurance. I think that ultimately, in politics, in government, we've got to make sure we go through all the proper procedures, and therefore, we are forming structures. We have a database right now as UZA that we use to track and really benchmark how far we are progressing, who's involved, where they are, and just seeing the growth within our organization. I'm certain and confident that we will do well.
Supporters are very deceitful. Do you agree?
Absolutely, I think so. We've seen it many a time, I think, in elections. And for us in the by-elections, if I'm really reflecting on what we did leading up to the by-elections, we met thousands and thousands of voters, and you don't see them showing up at the poll. Again, the reasons are all there. They say, oh, we weren't registered, and there were these issues and that issue. Even we as UZA had a challenge where, we were concerned about the whole election process. We didn't think it was completely free and fair. One of our candidates, her face on the ballot was completely blemished and like it had splotches on it, so she was unrecognizable. But still, that's not an excuse for the number of votes that we yielded. We should have had many, many more. So we do need to figure out what is it going to take to get voters to turn up.
Some candidates have had their own polling agents not voting for them.
Yes, I've seen that. Again, there are very different reasons. Zimbabwe is a very complicated, environment to live in. People all have different motivations, and I know in Zimbabwe, sadly, a lot of people also are very easily enticed. We also, as UZA, realize that not every single person who's in our party is an UZA person. They're also infiltrators. We've had all sorts of things already in the short 9 months that we've been a political party. But I think in the way that we are engaging our party members, in the way that we are working with individuals at a community level, we strengthen those bonds. It's going to take time. We're a nation that's been disappointed enough times. And so for someone to really believe in their vote again, it's going to take a lot. It's going to take a lot of conversations, a lot of convincing. But I have faith in the people of Zimbabwe.
Democracy is expensive.
Yes, it is.
And the issue of resources has been a huge stumbling block for new political entrants, like it is also for business when you don't have enough capital. Now, how is your wallet? How is your support base on that level?
Yes, I don't have a limitless wallet. We have relied heavily on the citizens of Zimbabwe to really meet us halfway and support the campaign. We're going to need a lot more help. We are one political party that has taken its own stand and said we're going to go it our own way with Zimbabweans. We're not looking for, anyone to give us a bailout in terms of, sort of buying our political party. So it's going to be a tough road, and I think that is something that we all are working very hard on. But I know the resources will come. I know Zimbabwe always delivers. We are resilient as a nation, but we've got great support, tremendous support.
The T-shirt is a very powerful political tool.
Yes. It is. It is. You bring up T-shirts, and it's a very contentious one too at the moment for UZA. Yes, we've got regalia, we call it, and so we've got T-shirts. We've got these fabrics that the women also use, and we've found people are making dresses and shirts and all kinds of stuff. Our colors as a political party have always been yellow as a primary color, and then we also have brown and green. And so our T-shirts from day one were yellow. And I'm seeing there's now this emergence of a yellow movement, which is very flattering because it was our color originally. But we're not going to sit and bicker about who came first. But I know UZA originated sort of the yellow movement as it is. And it's an identity symbol. I think it's part of just like our symbol, what we identify each other as when we greet each other. We have symbols, and part of the symbolism for us is yellow. We're not changing that. It is part of what UZA is.
The disadvantages of being small, is it not?
The disadvantage of not jumping onto social media and being a social media political party. With UZA, we were so concerned about staying true and being genuine when it came to citizens' engagement.
But politics is not about that, is it?
It really has to be. I
it's
think
not.
it needs to be, because ultimately that's why we keep going wrong. We're voting for leaders who maybe can tell a very interesting story, or create a very interesting narrative on on social media, but ultimately for us, we need to know what Zimbabwe wants. We need to build Zimbabwe together. We can't sit and say a few people in government are going to rebuild the whole country. We need all citizens involved in this process. And that is part of what we as UZA are focused on. It's part of our values. We want every citizen to feel relevant and to have a part to play in rebuilding Zimbabwe. So we focused there, but social media and digital media and all that is very important. And yes, we didn't make ourselves as visible to begin with, but I think you'll see a very big change there.
President Emmerson Mnangagwa says, "Nyika inovakwa nevene vayo," but you're saying that the politics is excluding the citizens. So is this, in your view, that statement mere rhetoric?
It is very much rhetoric, and it's interesting. This was one of the recent sayings of ZANU-PF that emerged after UZA started saying, let's unite as we build Zimbabwe. This was always our slogan. It's been that way since 29 May. It is rhetoric, and ultimately that's why Zimbabwe is not progressing. You can't just believe that a few individuals are what it's going to take to build our country. And these, this Venevayo, yes, indeed, we believe that there's a lot of, significance and importance in our culture, in our, in what we identify as leadership within Zimbabwe. But ultimately, everyone has a role to play, from the youth, who are often overlooked, don't have a voice in shaping the future agenda of this country, to the ordinary man and woman who is sitting kumusha. They have a role to play. I think in Zimbabwe, there are a lot of missed opportunities. I think that even in what we call our rural areas, there's potential, unbelievable potential, but we're not utilizing or catalyzing that. We're just saying, these are the sort of the less important spaces. Let's focus on areas that we as individual leaders consider important. That's wrong. We need to make sure we find, in some countries, I always say this, some of the greatest inventions, some of the biggest companies emerged from an idea of an individual in the most humble of settings. Well, what are we overlooking in Zimbabwe? There might be inventors out there in the most humble of spaces that we are not, leveraging or supporting. We're not capitalizing on what we have here in Zimbabwe. So we need to go back to the basics and look at, what are the ideas that the citizens have, and give everyone an opportunity to have a voice. I believe that sincerely, that is one of the reasons we have not progressed as Zimbabwe. We're one of the richest countries in the world. I mean, truly one of the richest countries in the world. But we are always, that impoverished nation, that third world country. We shouldn't be a third world country. We really shouldn't.
I want to look at women empowerment in Zimbabwe. Now, there is a legislative issue around women quota in parliament. And do you think it is an empowerment tool and it has helped women come out to participate in politics?
I believe it is an important and empowering tool, because oftentimes women don't believe that they have significance or they have a voice. I'm proud of a lot of the women I've met. Our candidate in Bizo, for example, a very young woman, and she was bold and brave enough to say, I can stand as MP. Yes, I don't have the experience in politics, but I'm capable and able because I've lived the life of Zimbabweans in my community. She was one anomaly, because that's not normal, I think, in Zimbabwe. For a woman, most women feel like, maybe they need to take a lesser role. Maybe they need to be told how they are supposed to do what they're supposed to do. So this is a necessary tool, I think, to ensure that, there's, in a sense, a mandate for women to be sitting at the table. I want to see more women sitting at the table. And I find that of all the things that challenges me as a woman is trying to convince women that they are able. Now, we as women we come with a lot of responsibilities, and our lives are not always conducive to politics. So I get that. But I think because of this quota, it does really ensure that the government is paying attention to, to the gender balance and making sure that we have women sitting in Parliament.
Some women I've spoken to, including leading lawyer Beatrice Mtetwa, has actually said that the quota system has not really helped women that much, because then it has allowed men to cherry pick, and they've picked on the weakest women and put them in office.
If you look at, again, the problems in Zimbabwe, it's about the way our government is structured. So again, it goes back to the leadership. There's validity to what she's saying, but in a system where the selection process is balanced and credible, you wouldn't have that challenge. We've seen it even within the development and shaping of UZA, because essentially we are a government in waiting. We're building a government, and we've seen a situation where men maybe are taking advantage of the other gender, trying to offer them opportunity, and it's not with the right intention, and we've had to address that. But certainly that's going to happen in the existing government, because again, it's about the integrity. It goes back to your values. It goes back to what you stand for as a government. With UZA, we've got very specific founding values, which don't allow for that sort of cherry picking of people based on certain qualities. They have to be capable and competent if they're going to stand as leaders in Parliament. So I think again it goes back to the leadership of our current political environment.
And some have also blamed women for not rooting for themselves and each other. Do you buy that?
It's difficult, because with women, I think a lot of times when a woman does come forward, or they are successful, I've seen it in the scientific field. I'm a scientist by background, and a woman works so hard to prove herself in a man's world, and she finally makes it. And oftentimes you find women perhaps will, they don't want to seem like, they are giving preference to women. And so they might not necessarily reach back and pull up the next woman. But I think I've seen incredible female role models who've done the complete opposite, who've mentored other women, who've brought them up, who've groomed them, who've invested in them.
Have you?
Absolutely. I've done that all my life. I think it's one of the most important aspects of, if you are a leader, you're going to make sure that you are building other leaders. A leader's only as good as the people that they've developed. So all my life I've done that. But yes, it is, we need to see more of that. We need women standing up for women and saying, and there are organizations in Zimbabwe, I think, that are doing that quite well, that are giving women the confidence, reminding us that we have the ability. Women bring something special to the table as well. And I believe a lot in diversity. I think if we all think the same way, if we're all men sitting at the table with the same ideas, we won't progress as a nation. So the diversity we bring, but also our experiences as women, I think bring something of significance to the leadership role. So, yeah.
And you spoke earlier on about the election, ZEC. Now let us talk about that. I want us to go to the electoral reform issues. What do you think really needs to be done to ensure that people not only perceive the election to be fair, but even those who participate in it believe it to be fair?
Yeah. It's difficult to sort of just encapsulate what needs to be done, but I will say this. In Zimbabwe, we need ZEC to remember what it stands for, why it exists, and that is not to represent one political party, but all political parties. So that accountability is something that is very much lacking. I think everyone in Zimbabwe, if you speak to anyone, they'll tell you there really is not this level of accountability, and there's an arrogance about ZEC.
Let's talk about that arrogance.
This is a
where do you find this arrogance? Where does it reside?
Well, look, here's an example with UZA. Look, we had a candidate who plainly made a complaint and said, on our ballot, on my ballot, my picture is not clear enough, and it's not the same as the other candidates. You can't see my picture. She reported this to ZEC, and they disregarded this. They completely disregarded this. Now, this is an organization that's supposed to stand for all of us as political parties. So I question, you know, to not even acknowledge and address and correct the issue tells me it's arrogant. And we've seen examples like this all across, you know, the history of our, you know, our political landscape here. So there's arrogance, but not only that, I feel like, you know, the accountability needs to really be, you know, looked at, and a lot of people are calling for, yeah, ZEC needs to be reconstituted, we need to start afresh. I don't think that that's a realistic goal, but I think that some sort of accountability needs to be put in place. We need to really make sure that, you know, corrective measures are taken. And it's complicated. I think it's one of those few scenarios where all of us as political parties need to sit at the table and come up with a solution. And we're going to have to do what it takes to pressure ZEC to do the right thing. Because unless the voter really believes that there's validity in their vote, we're not a true democracy.
At one point, Justice Priscilla Makanyala Chigumba, who is the ZEC chairperson, said that she was not here to win a public relations exercise at ZEC. Now, some believe that elections are actually a public relations exercise. What is your view?
When you say public relations exercise, certainly the voter needs to go to that, you know, that ballot box knowing that, you know, I have full confidence in the people who are managing this process. And when you hear of all of these last minute things that are reported as, you know, dubious and questionable in terms of the intent of ZEC, the PR is very poor, right? Because the voter obviously is going to then know, I cannot count on and trust this, you know, commission to do the right thing. So I believe there is, to some extent, a lot of need for ZEC to work on regaining the confidence of the voter. And yeah, they need to pull their socks up and say, who do we really report to? That's ultimately what it comes down to. The moment ZEC realizes they report to, you know, Zimbabwe as a whole and are not biased, then you'll see a complete change in attitude. We're not seeing it yet.
How do you win with that system?
There are a lot of odds against us. You know, looking at the by-elections, I don't want to say that there was blatant vote rigging, because I didn't see any evidence of that, if I'm, you know, really being objective. I think that, you know, we all, as political parties...
You think the smudging of the picture
would
this, not be a real platform?
Yeah, so when I was speaking, sorry, about the vote count, there is not a free and fair electoral environment. Like the elections are not free and fair. There are disadvantages across the board. And this is why we went to the High Court and we filed a case against ZEC just prior to this election. But what I'm talking of in terms of the, you know, the process, you know, I don't believe anyone came to a poll station and there were already, you know, any sort of, you know, there are a lot of issues, of course, on our voters' roll, and there are many, many discrepancies. But, you know, what I'm speaking of is we all have the ability to have election agents. We're able to observe and see what's actually happening at the polls. What I see, however, is a very inefficient system, a very painful and challenging system for anyone trying to compete in this electoral system. You know, when our election agents have to sit in a tent that is leaking, it's raining, there's no electricity in the tent. I mean, that goes back to, again, the competence and the ability to manage a system. And so, you know, beyond even just the issue of people saying the elections are unfair, there are many discrepancies on the voters' roll, we need to really look at, you know, rethinking how we operate in terms of the whole electoral environment. You know, I was horrified as I was going at, I think it was 1 o'clock in the morning, from poll station to poll station, and we were trying to just verify and make sure that our electoral agents were there. And I wanted to see firsthand, and I could not believe you know, the conditions that everybody was working within. So that, I think, is one of the biggest challenges, because for us to have election agents there, the environment shouldn't be so difficult and so challenging. However, I also believe that we need, as Zimbabwe, to turn up in overwhelming numbers. If we are to really overcome this current system. We always say as UZA, we need 6.5 million votes because we're going to have to make sure that we have that many more votes to ensure that we are, we have a safe win in 2023.
Then just, what is the role, in your view, of the police and the army in these democratic processes? Because a lot of people have complained that these institutions, key institutions, have been partisan.
Yes, it's a difficult one. As UZA, we have traveled extensively. We've been to almost every constituency in terms of, engaging voters. And at each of these places, we've had to, interact with the police. We go and actually request permits from the police. And then, of course, when we host events, the police are present and they're there. I've not seen anything from the police as such. With regards to UZA, I cannot, say that we've been intimidated or harassed by the police. We've been given paperwork as needed, not always, in an efficient way, not always in a timely manner, but we've not really faced significant challenges. And in fact, I think most of the police we've spoken to have said, look, we are here to represent everybody. We are not supposed to be, limiting your access. I think, it depends on your approach, because with us as UZA, before we go into any town, the first place we go is to the police station and introduce ourselves. We don't go into a place, again, it's about arrogance. We don't go into a place without first consulting the proper authorities.
But do you have to?
We are supposed to. You really cannot, according to Zimbabwe's, authorities, you are supposed to get, documentation that gives you a permit to use. Now, they don't have to approve your gathering, but they are supposed to be notified that you're going to be gathering as a political party. And so we've done that. We've followed all the necessary protocols. I believe the army, the police, they are people as well, just like everyone else. They have children in the same schools. They are struggling without water at their homes, just like everyone else. I think that there is a lot of work that needs to be done to correct these institutions, at the higher levels, because again, it starts with leadership. And we've seen examples of abuse of power in Zimbabwe, and we do need to, to take a hard look at that. But from our perspective, we've not had significant challenges.
Now, this is the Free Talk, and I've been having with me the president of UZA, President Madame Elizabeth, and she is confident that come 2023, ngapinde yake mskana
ngagadzwe mskana ngagadzwe 2023 mskana ngagadzwe.
Amazing. And she is coming in with a new politics with the UZA, and she's determined to make a footprint on the Zimbabwean political landscape and transform the economy of Zimbabwe and change our social perspectives. Now, this is the Free Talk, the alternative voice that allows everybody to be heard. Now, Madam President, before you leave, I would want you to look into the world and maybe leave words from your heart, not a question from me, but also just as you deliver that, realize a young girl in a patriarchal society who also wants to aspire to stand up and chair a meeting of men and be a leader and aspire, actually, maybe one day, eventually achieve being president of this great nation.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Thank you for that. And really, I was raised by a very strong woman. I happen to have been the daughter of the first woman in Zimbabwe to stand as president. She was a role model to me, but she was also a woman who I couldn't understand why and how she was so determined to see a very different Zimbabwe. She was well ahead of her time. And it's music to my ears, actually, to hear you say, I could be speaking potentially to a young woman a young girl, a child maybe, who one day wants to become president of Zimbabwe. And I think the message that I really want to share with you, but with everyone in Zimbabwe, I think my job is actually not as difficult as it could be. And that is because I know as Zimbabwe, we have the most amazing people. When I think of everywhere that I've been around the world, it's the Zimbabwean people that have made me most proud, because we're building the rest of the world. But I think now it's time for us as Zimbabwe to relook, refocus at the beauty that we have in our own country. And it starts with you. It starts with you, whether you're a child, a young girl, a young man, whatever it is that you're going through today. I think we need to all just refocus and realize that we have everything that we need here in Zimbabwe. What we need is change. What we need is a very different future, and that only starts by changing the people that are leading us into that future. And so I would say, I had a conversation a few days ago with someone who was saying to me, how long are you going to be president of Zimbabwe when you become president? I don't want to be president for very long. I've got a lot of other things that I want to do as well, but I want to pave the way for change. So continue to have that boldness, because we're going to need future leaders in this country. We're going to need very different leaders, people who have a heart for the people of Zimbabwe, people who care about what life is like for every single citizen, not just for a few citizens. People who want to see an inclusive government where we represent every citizen, no matter where you come from, no matter what your education is. So keep the dream alive. Tell other people that there is Elizabeth Valerio. She wants to be your president come 2023. Vote for me. And I promise you, Zimbabwe will be very, very different. Thank you. Thank you for that opportunity.
Beautiful. But we would want to hear the name of your mother.
My mom was named Isabel Shanangurai Madanguri. She was the first woman in Zimbabwe to run for president. She stood in elections against Mugabe. This was her symbol, her party symbol. So others have adopted it now. I was surprised to see it. Very surprised to see it. But in the archives, that was my mom's political party symbol.
Amazing. Thank you very much for joining us here on the Free Talk in proud partnership with the Frederick Newman Foundation. Now, this is the biggest socio-political and economic platform and talk show in the country at the moment. And we're so happy and proud to have you join us before you become president in 2023. This is the Free Talk, Free Nation. We allow voices to be heard. We are an alternative. Now, Zimbabwe needs to rethink, relook, and allow Zimbabweans, regardless of their gender, their tribe, or of their ethnic backgrounds or skin color, to work together and build a nation that we can all call home, that we can all come home and feel proud of. And this is the reason why we have these conversations. This is the reason why we are in journalism, to make sure that Zimbabwe hears itself, hears its voices, and rediscovers its potential. Now, thank you very much for joining me here with the president of UZA, Madam President Elizabeth, and me, as usual, your host, Dara Blessed Mhlanga, here on the Free Talk in proud partnership with Frederick Newman Stufta on Heart and Soul TV and radio. Until next time, thank you very much.